Dear audience, good day. Welcome to 2021 World Intellectual Property Forum. I'm the moderator, Professor MeiHsin Wang from National University of Science and Technology. I'm also the fellow of Royal Society of Chemistry UK. Today I'm here for this panel titled IP Strategy for New Era. In this panel, we're very honored to have Kenichi Nagasawa, the Senior Managing Executive Officer, Canon, Dr. Josu Kim, former Chief Presiding Administrative Judge, IPTAP in Korean IP Office, with industry experience at LG, Professor David Wentang Su, VP and General Counsel in MediaTek, and Mr. Shinsuke Ogawa, the General Manager of IP NTT DOCOMO. Nevertheless, my co-moderator, Professor Edward Lemon, Managing Partner of Lemon Lee Shu. All our eminent panelists are the Senior Executive Officers, VPs, General Counsel, General Managers from the global leading companies. They will elaborate their experiences in handling IP matters and enlighten us their strategy and philosophy in their leading companies. Our first speaker is Mr. Kenichi Nagasawa from Canon. He's also the LES Japan President-elect. Dear Nagasawa-san, highly appreciated for joining this panel. Canon has been in top 5 patent applicants in US for 35 years and #1 in Japan for 16 years. As we are aware, it requires enormous efforts, cost, innovations, and managing and maintain such a huge number of IP. However, Canon is determined to maintain technology first, incorporating your spirit of pursuing differentiated development of technological strengths with intellectual property right protection, including the underlying technology required by the product and wireless communication, image compression shared in the social media infrastructure technology. May you kindly enlighten us how you manage Canon under this COVID-19 pandemic impact?
Okay, and so I might need to speak about the background first. And because technology-wise, people get used to utilizing cyberspace and web meeting like this. Therefore, remote technology is progressed actually, and also if people contact each other, that sort of pandemic is much more spread worldwide. Therefore, they try not to come and alone or something like this. Therefore, even in the hotel or hospital, some parts of the human being is replaced by the robot. Means unmanned service get popular and popular and promoted, accelerated. And also, even Japan is a very cash, dependent country. Even so, if I pay the cash, normally hand into hand up to last year, maybe beginning of last year. After that, they will make an automatic vendor without any contact with a human being. Then, obviously, they recommend or promote us to utilize, card or debit card or other payment way, and without touching or without cash. And education and life care or medical care could be changed somewhat. And especially, as I mentioned later, population will be diversified probably. In that case, the lack of the schools and lack of the hospital or lack of care facility in the countryside. Currently, population is so small, but maybe increased. And also, part of the education is replaced by the, web classes, not in the human classes. And life care, for example, life care workers normally take care of all of the elder people. However, the part of it also starts replacing by the sort of robot or cameras or something like this. Medical care, it's also very difficult to go to the hospital, and limited number of hospital, and also many patients for the COVID-19 exist. In that case, medical care is slightly changed to the remote. In Japanese case, it's not so popular because of the certain law or certain rules. But in the other countries, I realize many countries replacing, and some of the hospital-wise treatment to the telemedical care. Yeah, it's the first. Second slide, please.
Yes.
Yeah, second, please. And people get used to teleworking or cyberspace. Therefore, cyber space development would be progress more and more. Utilization become bigger and bigger. But in that case, for example, like Canon, many Japanese or Asian companies, it depends on their core competence located in the device or component or in the physical area. But it's a very good chance to create a new business in, both using physical area, space, and cyberspace as well. Then, so many new development is necessary between the cyberspace and the physical space. And probably it's a very good chance after the corona pandemic and the economic is coming back and people's demand, people's need will be, diversified. Rather, many various needs and various demand come up. The next slide, please. Then you can see in the population disperses and needs and business will be get smaller, but more and more. Now, in that case, we have a lot of chance to, put up new businesses. Now, in that case, we can think about the small lot of the components or devices, but so many kind of the devices or components would be necessary to be manufactured. And in that case, very difficult for educating human beings, probably with a better utilize more robots in the factory. The factory should be much more automated. And this is my prediction. And also in that case, so many, suppliers necessary. So many component or material is necessary. In that case, supply chain management is very much important, not only in the upstream, but also in downstream. And that's slightly drawn in the next slide. Yeah, if you have your core competence technology within a certain physical device or physical component or materials, in that case, you need to create cyber physical solutions. And you might need to collaborate with, open innovation type collaboration with academia or startups or small or middle-sized entities. In that case, those are one of the sort of the competitor of the technology for the physical side. And also, you need more suppliers. In that case, some of the suppliers are big enough. In that case, supplier might be a competitor. And probably you can't make your business by yourself. In that case, you need, for example, cyber partners. For example, very typically Amazon or Google or those and cloud provider is one of the partner. Another partner should be a solution provider who are already get used to creating those solutions, and we sell or we let them to use our solution or our cyber physical solution to the user, but that users might be normal consumers, but the majority is, I think, business partners. And if you, for example, I'll give you one example. Canon recently make up one solution, businesses, and we have a drone flight And then we put on the camera, the drone. Then that drone is go around the infrastructure. Then that camera took, make very complicated cracks. For example, in the bridges or dams or something. In that case, if we can use AI correctly, which crack is dangerous, which crack is not so dangerous, or this sort of many insight of the human being put into the AI, and we can find which infrastructure have to be amended, fixed soon. Then, but in that case, customer may be in the ministerial infrastructure. Well, in that case, it's not human, normal consumers. Maybe other, architect company would be a customer. But architect company is also sometimes a big company. They might, file the similar patent others. In that case, they also be a competitor. It's sort of background.
Thank you very much, Nagasawa-san, for sharing the background and your risk management, how Canon cope with COVID-19 pandemic era. Would you mind sharing any strategy change during these years? So what would be Canon's position and strategy under this new normal era then?
Sure. Then
The next slide.
Next slide, please.
Yes.
This is a typical Canon strategy, historical Canon strategies. Now we try to create new technologies protected by the patent, sometimes a trade secret. Then we start certain pretty big business like a camera and printer. In that case, we need to stop newcomers so enter into our business itself. Then we file the patent, we enforce the patent. Then we can get some money, and then we can reinvest that money to the next technologies. It's a Canon's historical successful story about the technology and IP and patents. Now, however, probably this system itself is somewhat currently partially deteriorated. Why? Because of the you mentioned sometimes general technologies like SCPs. If you can count SCPs in each smartphone, it's come to the 100,000 for each smartphone. In that case, only the one patent can work as this way. And some of the users of that patent might ignore because it's a small amount of the payment they expected. This is called holdout problem at the moment. And obviously, relating patent for the standard is much more than that. In that case, and we need to, how can I say, categorize or discriminate core patent, compete patent, and general technology patent. Therefore, this is a trend. However, if we need to go to the cyber area, especially cyber solution, in that case, we have to use so many general technologies. It's obvious. Maybe ourselves, maybe our partner, whichever business creator, several companies create new business. So at least one of them should infringe on those SCPs or infrastructure-related patent. Next slide, please. Therefore, if we create those business, we might need to change the IP strategy.
Yes.
And for example, big business, one patent is very important, and in that case, we need to much thoroughly or perfectly check in the third party's patent. Because if our business is big enough, third party try to enter, then if they have one patent, it's big impact. And however, if we go to the new cyber physical new business, we are rather challenger. In that case, if we need to check all infrastructure patents, maybe 1 million or more than that, in that case, it's practically impossible.
Yes.
Then we need to, if possible, it takes 1, 2, 3 years. In that case, new business gone. then we'd rather, for the new businesses, we'd rather put on the importance of the patent filing first. Now, even it may be located into the prior technologies. Anyway, we should file what our business doing, and also if new technology implemented, we should file as quick as possible without checking third parties' patents. Then, obviously, so we can ignore in the socially necessary patent. Rather, if you use a key component or key technology or key materials, we might concentrate to study that sort of patent only. Especially smaller business, and probably impact of the third party's patent is get smaller comparison with traditional Canon business. That I suppose. Then next scenario, next slide, please. Then how our patent portfolio shall be. Product technologies was very much important, or somewhat new technologies in the physical areas. It's tangible. We can check sometimes on third parties infringement. It's still very important for keep our big businesses. However, if we go into the new businesses, various businesses, and we need more and more general and common technology related patent. Now, because one reason is very difficult to predict or suppose who is a competitor. And as I mentioned, maybe come from upstream, maybe come from downstream, maybe our suppliers, maybe our cyber partners, and they might be our competitors in the IP area. In that case, with a better increase portfolio regarding general common technologies, which can be used in the various competitors. Even we can't predict at the moment. And if, for example, if 5G SEPs, it's very, very much useful to utilize against any competitors. That's why I now are promoting the international standard activities and also finding more and more common technologies like AI, fintech, and this sort of area. And it's a sort of prosecution strategy changed. Then I think that's it.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing how the Canon they cope with the emerging technology and integrated with your traditional IP management style, and that actually bring you into a new cutting edge. But however, we understand Japan has a very profound cultural heritage, and I think the management style is very different from the Western system. So when you bring in so many emerging technology like the drone with very advanced cameras and new technology, you must hire a lot of new stuff. So how you manage to develop all the stuff they may working on the new technology or the existing technology, all can develop their skill set and working together to bring in Canon for the future success.
Yeah, so according to my experience in working in Europe and the US, it's the labor system from Europe and the US and Japan is totally different, as you mentioned. And however, lately, I feel many Japanese employees change their job. I think according to the quick change of the business itself, culture is gradually, I think, changing. Then, having said so, so it's a Canon sort of philosophy to create expert of the certain area of the IP work, like litigation, like a prosecution, like a contract. Now we try to keep a salary pursuit of the expertise of those areas. Now, otherwise, we should ask everything to the patent attorneys. not do ourselves. But they are knowing what is our way of litigation, way of prosecuting, or way of contract, or according to the Canon's past culture. Now, those people who shall work to maintain current big business, like imaging business or printing business. I say imaging and printing, not camera and printer, because printing is not only the paper, but also walls, for example, or carpet, or print. Now, those printing area is Canon's base of the big business. Another area is imaging, not in the camera, I mentioned. Surveillance cameras, drone cameras, or, sometimes even in the dark area, we can take some of the picture, or chasing some of the crime, those areas, security areas. And also, if you can see some of the unseen, subject within a certain, certain things. In that case, we might use X-rays, we might use other wavelengths, light, and it's also imaging area. Therefore, our main business is imaging and printing. But apart from them, we have a medical, we have an industry, many areas, and also we should establish some of the new business currently at seed. Maybe that seed will be grown to the small businesses. In that case, I can't allocate the many people in the one business. In that case, only one person has to be, treat everything regarding IP, not only the prosecution, but the contract and litigation, enforcement, or administrations, or everything. Then even copyright counts, even trademark counts, even portrait right counts. That one person should treat everything. In that case, he or she need sort of the business sense. Then what is important for the business? What have to be prioritized? That sort of sense is necessary. It's not expert. Rather, multiple talented IP people is necessary, I guess, or I suppose. Therefore, our program, education programs recently slightly changed to make those people. How to make? Please go to the next slide. One is, anyway, so I let them to have many various different experiences. In that case, I might dispatch those candidate person to the other company or other association, our subsidiaries, or public organization. They might have a different view of each businesses. In that case, that sort of a sense or that sort of experience would be a much educative for that people. It's one of the way. Now, another way is within the Canon's IP headquarters, we have a prosecution team, a litigation team, licensing team, and trademark team, and everything. And I might put in those people who would be a multi-talented IP person to move to the other department or this sort of things. And also, another necessity is a long-term view. And for example, if you can count on this year's, profit and loss, it's much easier to predict. But if you can think about how technology will be changed 10 years later, or how Canon's, business should be 10 years later, how the cyberspace, how the AI is used, what kind of law come up within the 10 years. That sort of long-term view is also necessary. Therefore, I would like to make such opportunity to exchange that sort of opinion in the same age. In that case, they will brush up each other. This is a typical, measures to make up that sort of person.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing how Canon developed the skill set and synergy people's competence for further revitalize Canon. Thank you very much for Nagasawa-san's in-depth and comprehensive explanation regarding IP strategy and how you skillfully manage and maximize the efficacy competence of the IP management style in Canon.
Thank you very much for Nagasawa-san, your very kind sharing. I'm just wondering, do you have any particular comments or suggestions to the corporates in the whole supply chain?
At the Bangalore and India.
Mm-hmm.
And, therefore, so main audience would be Asian people, I think. Therefore, that sort of strategy is based on the, physical component or physical manufactured product. Maybe only that one, we could be just a supplier. In that case, no business maker. Business maker control price or cost on the supplier. In that case, we can't make any good profit. We should make up the business by using cyber area, and even collaborate with some people. Then, especially in the Asian people, shall collaborate. Cause as I mentioned, supply chain management is very important. There are many parts and materials or start manufacturing in the Asian area. If we can collectively collaborate, and now we can make a very good position for the whole business. Even if we involve in the European and American companies, we might have a good position on that business. And only one company do everything. It's almost nonsense for the future. Therefore, I just want to say, Asian fellows, we should collaborate.
Thank you for sharing how the Asian company, they should try to synergize their competence to make a more meaningful, efficacy, and profitable supply chain. Thank you very much for your very kind sharing.
Our next speaker is Dr. Joseph Kim. Dr. Kim is the former Chief Presiding Administrative Judge, IPTAP, Korean Intellectual Property Office. To your honor, before joining Korean IP Office, you were the VP and LG IP Center for a long period of time. Nevertheless, you have contributed to LG for decades on IP-related matters, supporting LG to succeed in global market through sophisticated IP management. May you kindly share the philosophy of IP management in LG?
Sure, I'll do. I believe your question is very thoughtful. And just briefly, I want to explain about my, philosophy or my policies while I was working at LG in the past. So I may choose, big 3 points to explain about how to manage IP professionally. Number one is, it's very important to put IP center as a business department, which means that normally, as a starting point, IP center will be treated as cost center rather than other kind of concept. But I really urge that you have to, or company must, place IP center as a profit center by, giving a certain value, such as business, one of business, kind of business department. By doing that, whenever any results coming out from IP center, people can give more credit on that. And also, people can, cheers about the results from IP center. And also, there will be a certain kind of business mindset is required to those members who are working at IP center. If not, they want to, stay behind of other business departments. never been, paid any attention from other departments at all. So even if it will take some risks, I do recommend, and I do personally does have a concept that, IP center must be defined as a profit center. That's number one. Number two, well, number two wise, it's simple. Who will become the head of IP center? So number one is, IP center is profit center. To become a profit center, number two is very important. The head of IP center will be CEOs of company. CEO is the company, or the authority. So he must be the person who will be in charge of IP center. That is most important part. If you don't have CEO support for the IP center, there's no way that you can have any success in generating or creating a certain profit from IP in a company. Just for example, one example is that U.S. Hewlett-Packard Company. One time, Hewlett-Packard Company's logo was invent under the Hewlett-Packard signage. That was, lasted during the CEO of Carl Fiorina. Carl Fiorina was one of first lady CEOs in U.S. companies. And she was one of very famous CEO. And she picked that logo for the company. That means that IP is the most important, one of important part as our company assets. And the second one is that I do want to emphasize, IBM. One time, well, Tom Watson, I believe that's his correct name. One time he was head of IBM's R&D center. And while he was as a head of IBM R&D center, he picked the word saying that think. That was the logo of IBM's R&D center. Since he picked up that logo, it's been lasted almost decades. Still, they keep using think as the logo for the creation and generation of IP. Since then, what happened in IBM? Almost decade, IBM has been leading IP society as the most thickest, most valuable IP portfolio in the United States. That's what happened. So we need such kind of role must be, given to the CEOs as the head of IP center. That's number two. That's why you have to educate your CEOs, let them understand what's the importance of IP. That's the second one. Third one is, third one is it will go to the IP members. If you want to, really encourage your members, IP members, work hard, enthusiastically to, make their own dream come true. You have to teach them, which means that you have to educate them and grow them much higher levels in IP area. Unless you will have your members become a internationally well-educated IP expert. You cannot expect that your company will become the leader in the world. So it's not because you are become number one in the world, it's because your members will come number one, then automatically your department and your company will become number one in IP area. That's, shortly, big 3 point regarding my IP policy and IP strategy.
Yeah, thank you very much. So turning the IP center as a profit center and getting a high-ranking support, career-wise, develop your colleagues, your staff with the vision, saying they will help to further make the IP management more important and make influential for LG. The very important example is you have been mentioned to us. It's a very remarkable milestone for LG is that you successfully support LG acquire a CODEX patent. By applying this patent technology, it enabled LG become the world #1 company who is able to manufacture the largest LCD screen in the world. It's a true milestone for LG. So would you mind sharing the process and your legendary history, those principal strategies in LG, how you try to allocate the usage resources based on those self-developed technology, acquire licensing in or licensing out technology. When you mention about you make your IP center profitable and make the company more important.
Yes, as you mentioned, how we can really support and help the business department will become very profitable for the company. That's very important thing. But to really help the business department or manufacturing sections, you have to set up a certain, IP strategy in line with R&D strategy and company business strategy. That is very important. Unless you can get some cooperation with business department and R&D department, you will not have any valuable IP at all. So in that sense, first of all, you have to arrange those 3 different strategies together, which means that you have to, find out what is company's business strategy, and then move on to R&D strategy. And then you will focus on your job, saying that if they want to, R&D in this area, then how we can extract or capture a new inventions from the R&D department. That is the most important part. So if I move to one example, in the case of LCD area, once, we try to develop large size LCD screen to compete with PDP manufacturers. At that time, PDP manufacturers dominant large size TVs and beyond. And on the other hand, LCD manufacturers are just stay in medium and small size of LCD only. There's a lot of issues about how we can make a large size LCD panel, such as if you want to make large size panel, the most important part is when you inject liquid crystal between 2 glasses. The bigger size panel, and it will take much more time to inject the liquid crystal just between 2 large glasses, which means it's not easy to uniformly inject liquid crystal inside of 2 large size glasses. It's pretty hard. and yield-wise, that's very, unsuccessful. So in that sense, we need to develop a different approach. So when we were, search and study how to make large size panel in a short time and uniformly well arranged. That time, we decided to develop large size injection equipment in cooperation with equipment manufacturers outside. At that time, most of the engineers are obsessed by such kind of R&Ds and development project. Nobody can move. They cannot waste their time at all. So I launched a special task teams to help those engineers in a way like this. I sent all of my members to the factory side and do not bother any of the engineers at all. But whenever the engineers comes out from R&D site or a factory site for their breaking time, you approach them and find out new ideas, new approaches. And just write down all those new ideas, new process into our patent applications. So when we finished that task, we almost generated 100 to 200 new inventions covering new process technology. What's been called as one-drop pilling process, which make large size panel all of a sudden, so that it will become industry de facto standard for making large size panel. So it was very successful. And also when it comes to Kodak OLED screen wise, there was another story. Kodak was a real innovators in the field of OLED, but the problem was that they failed OLED technology into real product, even if they spend huge monies and they really, spend a lot of, engineers try to make a real product, but finally they failed it, and they put all of their patent portfolio on sale, for sale, at the same time their business as well. So at that time, there was only one OLED manufacturers, only in the field of small size. That was our competitors, rivals, Samsung. But we want to try to extend and expand our business into OLED business, but we didn't have a right technology for that. So in that sense, we thought that we gotta purchase Kodak's business. But later on, when I was involved in such kind of project, I suggested we just purchase Kodak OLED patent only, not business as a whole, because we have our own OLED engineers. So there was as a starting point to launch our purchasing OLED patent. It was a consortium type, but in the beginning we failed, and later on we finally purchased by finalized the negotiation was Kodak. It took long, but there was very strong support from CEOs. If CEO didn't, give any empowerment to the leading negotiator, to me, I couldn't finish that successfully. So number one, CEO's decision. Number second, the empowerment to the leading negotiator. That's the most important part when I was involved in, OLED screen as well as LCD screen. In view of panel makers among, the world manufacturers. That's my experience.
Thank you very much for sharing this very intriguing story. First, you teach us you have the integration of IP strategy among business and R&D, and you initiate the special task team to develop internal patent profile. And you very smartly suggest the company buying the patent only instead of the whole business, sub-company business, the cost, and also endorse and also enforce the patent to make manufacture in your own company be very successful business. So it's a wonderful story, and it's very kind for sharing this insight. So apart from the IP philosophy and your management of your IP strategy in licensing out or an acquisition of IP, we are also aware you are the leading litigator in the world because you have been supported LG fighting in over 50 countries with several hundred patent litigations. We wonder, would you mind share your accents, how you decided to fight in the court, and when you decide to settle cross-licensing or initiating merger acquisition or other alternative small measure based on IP. Perhaps you would like to share more insights and true cases as well?
Oh, sure. Well, when it comes to IP litigations, mostly I was involved in patent litigations, both in the part of plaintiff and also defendant. But there were more cases in the as a defendant side. But when it goes to the litigation, the most important part to organize a litigation team in a company. To do that, you have to, consider one important thing. You cannot win the case just, hiring lawyers and investment money for the teams. There's no way. But one important thing is that how you can find competitive lawyers in the world. That's the most important part. If the litigation occurred in the United States, absolutely you must find U.S. lawyers for that. The litigation in the U.S. Who is the best lawyers in the world? That's the most important part. How are you going to find it? Well, there's many ways. I absolutely understand that everybody does have its own know-hows, how to locate and find the right lawyers. But in my view-wise, I did this. Well, first of all, I get several candidate lawyers who will really represent us in a certain case, and that's fine. I check all those candidate lawyers, and then perhaps I pick 2 or 3 lawyers, and then either I directly meet with them and have a small interview in person and find out whether he's the right person and right personality and right capability for our case. Those things are very important. If not, well, if you may choose to have a direct communication over the phone. That's possible too. I will just choose either one of the 2. So I picked, the very competitive lawyers by using such kind of tactics. And it was successful in my view. And the second one is, let's say that your lawyers are handling your cases in US, in New Zealand, UK, everywhere in the world. Okay, so you will have, common communications in email, perhaps using, phones, such kind of tools. But the most important part is that you got to go to the workplace, the place where the case is moving around, the case is moving ahead. If you have a case in UK, you got to go to UK court and UK, law firm, and just discuss that issue with your lawyers, and must attend UK court and find out what's been happening in the court. You know what? If you don't go and visit their places, you gotta miss so many points. What kind of point you will miss? Number one, you don't know what's the real issues in the court. Court-wise, one party is doing one argument, the other party is the rebuttal. That's always the case. But you don't know whether your lawyers are doing the best or your opponent lawyers are doing better. That's the important thing. The second thing is that you got to find out, the relationship between the lawyers and judge, your litigator and judge. If your litigators are doing very good, very excellent in view of your side, but the problem is that judge does have any bad feelings against your litigators. Whatever your litigators are doing the best in view of objective eye, doesn't matter. Judge will not give any credit, whatever your lawyers are doing in the court that really, make your cases go in the long way. So once you find out, you got to correct such kind of issues. How to correct that issues? Well, there are many other, tactics too. I may mention about the, recovery of such kind of issues later. But from, today's viewpoint, I think you got to go to the workplace and find the problem and solve the problem on the spot. That is the most important part. And how to manage that? Unless you will have the problem, you cannot have real efficient communication with your litigators at all. You got to pinpoint the problem and resolve, and also support for them. For example, sometimes there will be a strong proposal from the judges saying that, hey, plaintiff and defendant, it looks like your gap for the settlements is very narrow. So in my view, I will give one more chances. In my court right now, let's say that I will give 30 minutes or 1 hour for the settlement. You both parties meet together in person and find out the solution. If not, whatever it is, bring it to the court. That means, judges like the settlement. If you don't settle, who is stronger resistance to such kind of settlement, then that party will have very unfavorable instructions at the minimum from the judges, and you will have bad result even if you will finish your trials before the court. So that is most important part. So what I emphasize the importance of visiting the workplace. That is the most important part. Having that concept, you can find the problem and really find the solutions while you visit the workplaces, while communicating with the lawyers, while communicating your members in a team.
Thank you very much for your very valuable two case sharing. They does give us a lot of insight how to deal with litigation globally. Nevertheless, we are aware Korean IP office is among the top 5 in the world, together with USPTO, EPO, China, and Japan. And how would you describe the significant feature for Korean IP managed style if we compare with the other big corporate located in other regions?
Well, when it comes to IP authorization, offices such as KAIPO, I can explain briefly about KAIPO's activities in cooperation with other IP5 members to the best of my memory. Right now I just left KAIPO, so I rely on my memory briefly. So what I do is that, as everybody knows that right now the world is facing a COVID-19 pandemic all over the world.
Yes.
At the same time, we are also coping with the forthcoming fourth industrial revolution. So it comes together right now. So how we overcome the current difficulties and challenging issues under such, embarrassing situations, this is very important things. So I remember about KAIPO's activities like this. Number one, what was number one? We believe that we gotta, cope with COVID-19 pandemic that is very serious. All of a sudden, just within almost 2 years. So KAIPO decided to help the industry that we can overcome the pandemic. So in that sense, what they did was that, they got to establish and just organize a big data team, which means that how we can find some ideas that we can help the medical companies so that they can develop and find the vaccines and medicines to cure the COVID-19. I think that was a real good decision and smart movement very quickly. And later on, and KAIPO, just offered to share the knowledge and information, we found from the big data at KAIPO, so that maybe IP5 members, they agreed to share some, information together. I think that's good movement too. The second one is that, well, to boost the IP market in Korea, because we need to, establish IP favorable environment for the industry. To do that, what happened is KAIPO is really making, a certain tools to give a certain benefit to those companies who might have a damage from potential infringers. In that sense, they changed the IP law to protect the IP business strongly. IP business means that, IP business for the manufacturing companies. So how, we try to help them? We changed the IP law to increase the, IP damages almost 3 times, which is really huge. I think that's one, fashion going around in the world, including China and Japan and other countries too. So that's one good movement. And second one is trade secret. Trade secret is one of the important issues to the small and medium companies. Whenever small and medium companies, they make a deal with the large companies, they feel like they are victims always. Why? Because small and medium companies, they are providing, just component to the, big manufacturing companies. Then whenever they got a burden that, one is the timing that, big company will cut the supply of their, their component. That's big headache. So that to eliminate such kind of happenings, which means that small and medium company will not become a real victims in a sense of trade secret violation. Why? Actually, the violator will become, big companies. Once that happens, the violation of trade secret is very, very huge and critical. So to boost small and medium companies, trade secret violation does have a lot of heavy penalties based on the, changing the trade secret law. That's important thing. And number 4 is that how we prepare for the fourth industrial revolution. Internally at KIPO, what's been organized in KIPO is that KIPO has introduced Convergence Technology Examination Bureau newly to cover AI, VR, AR, IoT, drone, maybe autonomous driving technology, and so on. So that is one of the important things that we have to prepare for the future IP asset. That will help, the new business section that's related to high-tech, technologies. That's been happening in KIPO when I remember until I left KIPO.
Thank you very much for sharing those abundance project initiative from KIPO. And thank you again for sharing your valuable wisdom and comprehensive explanation with true cases. We hope soon again we can invite you for sharing more essence on how to match IP and monetization in corporate. Thank you very much. Thank you. Before we close the section, Dr. Kim would like to share some tips for the audience. It's very kind of you. Would you mind elaborate the tips for the audience?
Well, on the top of my tongue, well, I don't have a big point, but like I mentioned before, how you can handle your litigations in a workplaces, that's important thing. Like I said, how to pick the, the best lawyers, and how to manage, the relationship between judge and lawyers in the court. Well, I had one cases. In my cases at the U.S. court, once I was attending trial cases in the court, I found that the relationship between judge and my lawyers was really bad.
How could you find out that? How could you find out
that? No. Well, it's easy. I was in the court and looking the whole process behind them. So whenever our litigators is, arguing and stating something before judge, it looks like judge is not listening at all. Or sometimes judge is not listening, seriously. But whenever the opponent representative is, arguing and suggesting something, the judge is nodding his head and really, reacts very, very favorably. If you were in the call, then you will realize, you will sense it anyway. But I was there. I thought that this is very serious point. How I can cure this problem. Supposing that if you're gonna let your lawyers finish the whole trials, but how, what can you expect? You can expect the worst result.
Yes.
If you will just proceed having your litigators as it is. So I decided in this way. Well, let's say that if I will maintain our litigation lawyers until the end of this trial, the expectation is very crystal clear. So in that sense, I want to change my litigation lawyer in the court. And then I may have much higher percentage of success. At the minimum, 1 or 2% higher than the current litigation lawyers. I will take that higher percentage, even if that's 1 or more, 2% higher than. That's why I decided. And I had an interview very quickly inside of the same law firms. And I picked one, candidate, which I believed the best. So I had let he replace the former litigators. And you know what happened? At the end, we won the case. And then, all of my members were surprised. Why? Because the time when I replaced our previous litigators, our members, they all registered and they want to maintain the same litigators. I said, no, because I was head of, litigation. So I decided, and what was the result? And the result was successful, and it really changed judges' mindset as well. Remember that our opponent litigators has been doing much better than us, but all of a sudden it's been changed, almost balanced, right? So we had our case won at that case-wise. So it's good tips if it helped you, but it's my experience. I don't want you change, so often, but if you will, enrich and cope with such kind of worst scenario expected, then you gotta decide.
Thank you very much, Your Honor, for your very comprehensive, valuable sharing. Our next speaker is Professor Wen-Tang Su, the VP and General Counsel of MediaTek. Professor Su highly appreciated for joining us. MediaTek is a global family semiconductor company that enables nearly 2 billion connected devices a year. MediaTek is a market leader in developing innovative system on chip for mobile device, home entertainment, connectivity, and IoT products. MediaTek, dedicated to innovation, has positioned MediaTek as a driving market force in several key technologies, including high-power efficient mobile technology, automotive solutions, and a broad range of advanced multimedia products such as smartphones, tablets, digital televisions, 5G, voice assistant devices, and wearables. MediaTek empower and inspire people to expand their horizon and achieve their goals through smart technology more easily and more efficiently than ever before. Therefore, with a revenue of $10.9 billion in 2020, MediaTek is the 4th largest fabless semiconductor company in the world. To be in the leading company, the IPR strategy must be supreme to protect the intellectual access. Therefore, is monetization part of a MediaTek's IPR strategy? And if so, what specific monetization project has MediaTek developed over time?
First of all, thank you very much, Professor Wang, for inviting me to the panel. As you described, I work for MediaTek Inc. in Taiwan. We're a company doing semiconductor design. In the industry, we're known as one of the IC design houses, meaning that we employ a large number of engineers. We work on semiconductor design and outsource the manufacturing of our ICs to a semiconductor foundry like TSMC. In our industry, I mean the IC design house, intellectual property is critical for our competitiveness in the market. You also mentioned that last year we passed the $10 billion revenue landmark.
Yes.
It's a very important stage in the development of our company. And in a typical year, we spend about 25% of our revenue in research and development. We are a very R&D intensive company.
Yes.
To protect the result of this significant investment, we need to procure adequate intellectual property rights, including patents, but also, to a large extent, also trade secrets. Another important element in our overall intellectual property strategy. So in managing our portfolio, which is fairly large for a company of our size, we have more than 10,000 patent families worldwide. So there are multiple elements in our overall IP strategy. One of these elements or component is monetization. We are a company in the consumer products. Okay, if you look at our product portfolio, we have several important product lines. The first one is modem or SoCs for smartphones. That's a very large portion of our revenue. And the other, also major portion, is multimedia, including television and also other products providing multimedia contents to consumers. So if you look at our technology portfolio, we have a fairly large number of patents on standard technologies. For example, as you know, in the cellular communication area, there's a very significant number of companies working on developing product standards, because it's a field that allows working of products by multiple companies by having a standard technology. So we have a fair number of standard essential patents, for example, in the cellular communication area. We also have a fairly large number of standard essential patents in the multimedia, mainly video compression or video processing related patents. Those are also very important SEPs in our portfolio. The main approach we used to monetize our standard related patents is to join patent pools managed by these management companies. We join major patent pools to generate income for the company, so that we have these income, then we have these source of income to finance our future, partly finance our future R&D. So that's our main approach in monetization of our patent assets.
Thank you very much for sharing the media's text, how you monetize your essential standard pattern and how you contribute all of efforts to the standard organizations. But how do you ensure the alignment of the media text R&D business and IPR strategy? Because normally in the global companies, the IP is part of the cost. They concern is the cost, but you manage to make it a profit for the return on investment. But to alignment with the other department, it's another very tough task. So would you mind sharing how you do the job in the MediaTek?
We of course, our IP strategy has to be aligned with our business and also technology strategy. We do this by having intellectual property as one of the key strategic items for our management committee. At the top of a company, we have executive management team, including myself, all the VPs and also our CEO. We have extensive discussions at that executive or management level, so that we align our intellectual property strategy with our business strategy. For example, like all the other companies, MediaTek also has annual planning discussions at the top of the company. And we always have our IP or intellectual property management personnel to participate in discussion with both our technical or technology development people and also our business strategy people, so that every year when we decide the budget for our intellectual property spending, we always consider the future business and also technology trends and also business objective of the company. So we can use the limited resources we have in IP spending in a way that's most consistent with our technology and also business objective. So this frequent communication between our intellectual property personnel and also our management, our top management, I think it's critical mechanism to ensure that there's a very close alignment between the three different areas of corporate function.
Thank you very much for sharing how the MediaTek alignment with the business and IPR strategy. But in this panel, MediaTek is the only company who mentioned about the trade secret. It's a very unique approach. So I wonder, would you mind enlighten us how you decide between the trade secret and the patent when you invest in the protection of the MediaTek innovations?
Trade secrets are a very important component in our IP strategy, because the pace of technology change is very fast. Normally, if you have a patent application, you need some time to go through the patent prosecution process to get a patent. Normally, you spend maybe 1 or 2 years from the disclosure of invention to the grant of a patent. There's a period of time, okay? But change in our industry is very fast. So most of these ideas have to be embodied in our innovation, in our products, in our business very quickly. So it's impossible to have everything patented.
Yes.
We just don't have that kind of time, and also, as you know, it is costly to have patent protection. Okay, because you have to pay the attorneys, you have to pay the maintenance cost for your patent portfolio. So I would say most of the companies' innovation or invention have to be protected as trade secrets, in contrast with patents. Okay, so that's just the industry reality because of the fast pace of technological change, and also because of the cost concerns. So there's a pretty significant portion of the company intellectual property to be in the form of trade secrets. And as you know, the scope of trade secrets is much larger than the traditional protection offered by patents. Subject matter is broader, okay? Trade secrets protects not just your technical secrets, but also your business or strategic secrets. As long as you spend efforts or take reasonable measures to protect the secrecy of these valuable know-how, then you're protected against misappropriation, okay, by third parties or by employees, departing employees, basically. So the importance of trade secrets protection, I think, varies among different industries. For semiconductor industry, this is one very crucial or critical form of protection for our intellectual property. So we do spend a lot of human resource in deciding what to apply for patents, and also what know-how to be protected in the form of a trade secrets. So there are several common approaches adopted by many companies. For example, one of the requirements of trade secrets is that you have to maintain the secrecy. You have to maintain the know-how to prevent the discovery of the know-how by third parties. Okay, but some of the innovations, because of the nature of the innovation, it is impossible for you to keep the confidentiality or secrecy of your innovation once you introduce your product to the market. So for those, it is not feasible, to try to protect that type of innovation as a trade secret. Okay, then we have to decide if we want to file a patent for that. Okay, and another consideration, which is also commonly used by many companies, is to confirm whether or not an infringement will be able to be discovered, okay, through lawfully means like reverse engineering. Okay, for technologies that's very, very difficult to verify an infringement, probably not a good idea to apply for a patent, because even if you have a patent, it is not feasible for you to prove an infringement, then the patent only disclose your know-how without without giving you the advantage of having the exclusive right of a patent. So that's another standard you can use to make this kind of decisions. And the third one, of course, is every year you have a limited amount of budget for you to protect, okay, for you to procure protection for your inventions or innovations. And because of this budget constraint, there's only limited number of patents you can procure every year. So the rest of your innovation, of course, have to be kept in the form of trade secrets.
Thank you very much for the excellent, comprehensive sharing how trade secret can play an important role in a high-tech company like MediaTek. Upon the emerging technology and the political policy global influences, would you mind sharing us what is the major challenge for your IPR strategy going forward?
I think one of the major challenges is our mission or our mandate to generate value for the company's investment in intellectual property. For example, patents. Every year we spend a lot of money, yes, in procuring the patent portfolio. And it's becoming more and more expensive, both in terms of the attorney's fees and also because of the, over time, you have a bigger portfolio. So even the cost of maintaining that big portfolio is increasing very rapidly every year. So we always have this challenge of making sure that our program of intellectual property generates positive return for the company, either in the form of protecting the company, defensively protecting the company, or positively generating income for the company. Because right now, the intellectual property, unlike other subject matters handled by the legal department, is treated in a very business or management fashion more and more. So we're held responsible, accountable to the company to convince the company that their investment in these patents and also trade secrets, trademarks, other forms of intellectual property rights justifies the resources, the cost that companies spend every year. And that's the major challenge. Okay, as the company become bigger and bigger, we used to have this rough methodology. Okay, when the size of a company, in terms of revenue, when the size of a company increase, then normally the investment in patent matters, including prosecution and also litigation, because as a result of litigation, you pay money to settle the case. Of course, if you win the case, you can claim damages from the defendant. But in any event, this type of calculation or this type of operation is operating more and more like a business unit of the company. So you have to make business sense, okay, including the matters we just discussed about monetization. That's a good example that when you have budgets from a company every year to build up your portfolio, you need to have income, okay, from the portfolio so that the investment would make sense. Okay, you need to show the actual value of having a strong patent portfolio for example. So that I would say that's the major challenge for our IP managers in a company.
Thank you very much for sharing the insights in MediaTek. And apart from above achievement, MediaTek is also very smart on merger acquisition. As you just mentioned, you have to procure many portfolios and as well. So, for example, 2015, not only procure the portfolio, you also acquire companies like Richtech Technology, a fabulous vendor of analog IC and power management in 2015. In 2017, for acquisition of Iora for radio frequency chips. And again, last year, 2020, the acquisition of Intel affiliation in Piron for the power management chip as well. We have an audience. They are very curious how MediaTek could smartly choose their target company and how you proceed those merger acquisition.
Yes, M&A, of course, is very important in our industry. There's a general trend of consolidation in the past few years. So we also have a few deals as described by Professor Wang. Up to this moment, I think most of the transaction we have conducted, mostly business driven. Okay, it's not driven by intellectual property, not mainly, by intellectual property. But after we acquire a company, during the process of integration, IP portfolio is a very important item of work. So our patent or intellectual property teams are always part of that integration management team. So that because different companies, they have different patent or IP strategies.
Yes.
After a merger, one of the important things is to try to consolidate because the two companies already become one company. So in the past, they may have different IP strategies. They have different patent portfolio. After the consolidation, it's the intellectual property team's job to look at the portfolios and then decide how to also integrate the patent portfolio of these acquired entities into the main patent portfolio of the company. So this is also important step in our integration effort after a transaction.
Thank you, Professor Su, for your very sincere and detailed sharing on merger and acquisition. We hope next time we will invite you again to elaborate more essence how MediaTek engage in those merger acquisition. Our next speaker is Mr. Shinsuke Ogawa, the General Manager of IP in NTT DOCOMO. Let's welcome Ogawa-san.
Dear Ogawa-san, highly appreciate for accepting this interview and join the panel titled IP Strategy in New Era for WIPF 2021. As we are aware that NTT DOCOMO is Japan's leading mobile operator with over 80 million subscriptions. The name is officially an abbreviation, do communication over the mobile network, and it's also from a compound word, Dokodemo, that means everywhere in Japan. NTT DOCOMO is one of the world's foremost contributors to 3G, 4G, and 5G mobile communication technologies. Beyond what core communication services, NTT DOCOMO is challenging new frontiers in collaboration with a growing number of entities, partners, creating exciting and convenient value-added services that change the way people live and work. Under a midterm plan, NTT DOCOMO is pioneering a leading-edge 5G network to facilitate innovative services and that will amaze and inspire customers beyond their expectation. So since NTT DOCOMO is the largest mobile telecommunication operator in Japan and has been obtaining a lot of 5G SAP around the world. May you kindly share descriptions of your business and 5G SAP portfolio briefly?
Let me introduce DOCOMO by using slides. DOCOMO is the largest mobile operator in Japan in terms of the number of subscribers. We have a market share about 37% as of now. As you can see the right figure, our total revenue is about $44 billion. And our current largest revenue source is conventional radio telecommunications, such as packet and voice. Now we place emphasis on non-telecommunication services, what we call smart life business. The smart life business includes content distribution, finance, payment, and shopping, and so on. Currently, we focus on royalty program. The revenue from them has been expanding right now. Well, next please. Yep, please take a look at DOCOMO's R&D activities in terms of intellectual property rights, namely patents. In fact, we are a quite unique telecom operator because we have a large-scale R&D organization and own patents in many countries, including the US, Europe, and China. 62% of our patents are related to the global technological standards. In the worldwide survey presented by the third-party institution, DOCOMO is ranked as one of the top 6 standard essential patent holders in the 5G system, with having 9.5% SEP share. Yep.
Next one.
This is our summary of our business. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your very kind introduction. And the most telephone operators do not have much interest to submit contribution compared to the manufacturer at 3GPP, and which is an international project to develop the mobile telecommunication standard. And NTT DOCOMO, however, has been in the top 10 contributors related to 5G at 3GPP. So may you kindly share why NTT DOCOMO concentrates on standardization activities?
Well, we have several reasons why we eagerly seek for a standardization. First of all, in order to realize our corporate vision as early as possible, we think that standardization, it enables us to define our requirements as common specifications. In particular, as a service operator, we face customers in person at the sales outlet and have a lot of opportunities to acquire their requests. It's also important to apply Japanese specific requirements to the standardization specification. Specific requirements include radio frequencies, customers' preferences, and compliance to the law, to name a few. For example, it's worth pointing out that Japan is prone to natural disasters, including earthquake and tsunami. Once it happens, immediate self-protection measures are needed. We have played a major role in the standardization for defining so-called earthquake and tsunami warning system, also known as ETWS. It sends a notification warning to all of the devices on the place just after the disaster. Also, International Technical Conference allows us to acquire expertise and knowledge of 5G operations. This is quite useful in actual service operation. It helps us maximize the capacity, improving the mobility, and increasing stability. As for the corporate brand, we can enhance corporate value, tighten the partnership, and contribute to the industry as a whole. when it comes to financial benefit, we can expect economies of scale by defining the common specification so we can lower costs as shown in this slide. Finally, I'd like to point out the licensing. I have mentioned objectives listed here, but it's also important to keep them running. I mean, recovering a part of R&D investment is an essential activity to us. We license those essential patents with grant basis. Having said that, SAP portfolio is just the outcome of our R&D activities. These are why we are eagerly engaged in standardization. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing the rationale behind why you focus, NTT DOCOMO focus so much on standardization, and it's also very important. It will benefit for the world consumers as well. So the most important issue of accurately obtained subs is to ensure sensibility of them. So would you mind sharing your knowledge and experience in the patent prosecution for that?
Well, in the next please. In a patent filing preparation, we check a solution and an idea of our engineers before a standardization meetings deal with it. We timely file as many patents as possible. In filing, we make sure the patented technology and our contribution for the standard is relevant and correlated enough. After filing, IPR department, our engineers and outside counsels cross-check the essentiality of the invention and try to maintain the essentiality until the grant. What I have talked about is not particularly new to you, but such proper actions will be the most valid way to maximize the value of the portfolio. Actually, according to the latest study, the rate of the essentiality of our standard patents are quite high. It is estimated to be around 80% among all of our declarations, which can be compared to, on average, about 30% of all from others. Right.
Well, it's an excellent job and very complicated. We know it requires very high skill sets to develop the subs. So NTT DOCOMO is a very unique telecommunication operator because it is both a sub holder and a sub user. So would you mind share your policy for SEP to strike a balance between these two positions? Yes.
Well, you're right. Having both aspects of a patent holder and a patent user is somewhat complicated. Again, we place customer experience and benefit as a first priority when it comes to striking a balance. In that sense, both making innovation available across the industries and protecting the intellectual property rights as important criteria. For example, SEP license fee should be set to low enough, which does not hinder new product development from licensees' perspective, who are willing to use the standard technologies. At the same time, the license fee should be reasonable enough that can recoup an R&D expenditure to some extent and does not impair the incentives of patent holders. For DOCOMO as a patent holder, this is quite essential activity in order to keep producing the new technologies with a positive spiral. We consider that patent pools should be more utilized since they offer one-stop license with reasonable conditions. Of course, if a licensee requests, we can provide a bilateral license as well. From the licensee's perspective, when we purchase a product from a vendor, we require manufacturers to obtain necessary licenses from the patent holders in the procurement agreement. And this means we pay a license fee indirectly.
Would you mind sharing your personal career development? That may be very interesting for people who want to enter in IP, because people who can have such experience on SAP and 5G and also their monetization on this program is very unique. So would you mind sharing how you get into this IP business, your background and your vision? So not necessary to be fitting.
IP business, Actually, I'm head of this department, and I just joined 6 months ago in the IP field. I used to develop the mobile phones and engage in customer services and so on the terminal side. I just joined this department 6 months ago,
So basically, you are from engineering and marketing and PR. They're all very comprehensive and very broad experience. Then you were invited back to IP because based on your broad experience, they bring in IP department, new, new element, new atmosphere, and maybe the new development for the business. Is that right?
I just joined and I'm studying right now. But I also write patents, a couple of patents. So actually I'm used to it.
Thank you very much for Ogawa-san's in-depth and comprehensive explanation for NTT DOCOMO's IP strategy in new era. As we are aware, in February 2021, NTT DOCOMO and an international group of other leading firms joined together to announce they signed a basic agreement to establish a consortium to provide 5G solution, first in Thailand and later in other Asia-Pacific countries. With the possible inclusion of additional partners, NTT DOCOMO is expanding its global reach through strategic alliance with mobile and multimedia services provider in Asia-Pacific and other areas. Apart from global ambition, NTT DOCOMO became a wholly owned subsidiary of NTT, which is a Japanese telecom conglomerate after reorganization of NTT Group in 2020. NTT DOCOMO involved many meaningful government projects applying 5G technology, such as unmanned ships for automation of shipment operation, aiming in 2025. As half of the crew in Japan is over 50 years old, nowadays people are now fancying marriage and having children. The manpower will be a major problem in Japan, while the marine transportation accounts for about 40% of Japan's domestic logistic transportation. And it is an important foundation for supporting the Japanese economy. Another interesting project I found is the fishery IoT through 5G, which NTT DOCOMO started from 2016 with the fishery administration in crucial region, install ICT bureaus to collect various data such as water temperature, salinity, oxygen dissolvent, and turbidity of different depths, and then cooperated with academic unit to establish hydrological environment and various fishery consulting services. NTT DOCOMO also launched a mobile app for fisheries. Cooperative fishermen can check various real-time marine information provided by the factory of their mobile phone and judge where to catch. It's very convenient. So after our panelists' excellent sharing, my co-moderator, Professor Edward Lemon, the managing Director of Lemon Li would like to address his comment and share his view for our eminent panelists and audience worldwide. Professor Lemon is the very first U.S. attorney in China, speaking much better Mandarin than me as a Chinese, and a true expert understands China than anyone else, as my experience. Professor Lemon mastered corporate commerce, fintech, IP, tax, and finance at the Foreign Legal Council. He is the only private practice lawyer in China appointed by State Administration of Foreign Export Affairs, which is an agency state council, also as a legal affairs commentator for CCTV, CGTN. He's a fellow of the Chinese Academy of Social Science, the only Chinese government think tank organized of State Council. He's also the adjunct faculty, Tsinghua University, China University of Politics and Law, board directors of Faculty of Law, Shanghai Jiao Tong University, Fulbright Fellow, Shanghai Fudan University, at the direction of the United States Information Agency. The program established American Study Department in Fudan University. Professor Lehman is a China legal advisor for World Bank, the first foreign lawyer approved to work as a China law firm. Elect governors, American Chamber of Commerce by American business community, both in Beijing and Shanghai. He's the founder and stakeholder of Lehman Bush PE, with the son of U.S. Former President George H.W. Bush and younger brother of the U.S. former President George W. Bush. After we have various IP strategy from our eminent panelists, Nagasawa-san from Canon, Dr. Kim from LG, Professor Su from MediaTek, and Ogawa-san from NTT DOCOMO, may Professor Lehman kindly share your view on the IP strategy in New Era, in particular as a pioneer and early adopter ICQ, blockchain, cryptocurrency, digital asset, and fintech. Nevertheless, you are the first legal advisor of Bitcoin creator Satoshi Nakamoto in 2008.
Great. No, thank you very much for that very nice introduction. I really appreciate it. And it's really great to be with you, Professor Wang, at the 2021 World Intellectual Property Forum. That we've got to adjust, as all good IP practitioners and all good IP strategists have to do, to the pandemic, and so we're online. And like you said, I mean, the first part, there have been some incredible panelists in the group that you expertly interviewed, and where was Dr. Kim. And you explored, sort of the background from LG and Dr. Kim. He's, fought and litigated in over 50 countries with several hundred patent litigations. And you all, discussed the experiences on the skills and arts of how it is to litigate in those courtrooms around the world and dealing with cross-licensing, mergers and acquisitions, and alternative and smart business measures based on intellectual property. This whole thing is actually about trying to, educate and pass on information at the very highest levels. So having Dr. Kim explaining also in his role at the Korean IP office as being one of the top IP offices in the world, along with the USPTO and the EPO and China and Japan, discussed the various measures there. So that was a really, good insight into something that's very practical. And, one thing that I have to say is dealing in intellectual property all these years and being among, the first practitioners in the People's Republic of China, really good learning and good practices go on that are sort of intergenerational in learning from other people. And so that's why also with your in-depth discussion with Professor Su at MediaTek, about the global, which is really a global fabless semiconductor company that enables nearly 2 billion connected devices each year to operate. And they're a market leader in developing innovative systems for mobile devices, home entertainment, and smartphones, tablets, digital televisions, 5G, and voice assistant devices, wearables. So their revenue is like $10 billion in 2020. I mean, it's not the absolute biggest outfit with regards to this, but it's a significant player. And I mean, Professor Su went through their IP and MediaTek's IP strategies, R&D business, and it was extremely insightful because it outlined major challenges for the IPR strategy for MediaTek going forward, and discussed about how they're doing it with acquisitions that started as far back as 2015, where they bought Rich Tech, MediaTek did, and in 2017 with Aroa Technology Corporation, and 2020 again with the affiliation with and Pyron for power management chip, ASICS Electronics. So that was all very insightful. And then obviously the discussion with, Professor Ogawa from NTT DOCOMO. DOCOMO, of course, is the predominant mobile phone operator in Japan. And it's the official, it has that abbreviation for sort of, doing things, what is do communications over mobile networks. And so it's great to hear from someone that is such a prime mover in that market and with intellectual property. And that was how he explained that most telecommunications operators do have interest in contributing in contributions compared to other manufacturers in this space. And he kind of went into obtaining standard essential patents, which has to do with 5G and how they're going to play a part in 5G, which is really going to put together the Internet of Things and is going to be rocket fuel for the future. So, DOCOMO is very unique, and that was exhibited in his presentation, and what they're doing with partnering with McAfee, the VirusScan mobile, and Android users. And it outlined sort of the global ambitions of NTT DOCOMO under the privatization of its ownership, which is, involved many meaningful government projects of applying 5G technology. So, like I said, as both, being a part of this panel and, Professor Wang has done a tremendous job putting this group together, and it's a really a super high level group that you're not going to find anyplace else. And I just want to let people know the reason you have such a great level of folks, and the reason why the interviews and the panelists were so forthcoming is because of Professor Wang and her relationships, and because of what's happened with World Intellectual Property Forum. This is a really unique situation. And like I said, I mean, my father and grandfather were both involved in intellectual property, industrial design. And so I've been to a lot of conferences and interacted with a lot of folks. And there's really nobody like Professor Wang, MeiHsin, that has really been a maven connecting intellectual property people together. And when you take a look at people like DOCOMO or LG or Canon, I mean, for example, Canon was another panelist that was interviewed, and Dr. Nagasawa, he's general counsel and head of intellectual property. He was saying in his interview that he's involved currently now with 10 to 15 litigations worldwide, and they're in the Canon is among the top 5 patent applicants in the United States for 35 years in a row, and has been number 1 in Japan for the last 16 years. And the only time you're going to get folks like this to be forthcoming is someone like Professor Wang who's put it together. So I thought that was very insightful, and the Canon, that Dr. Nagasawa was talking about how some folks take patents and monetize them, and or if things get rough, they decide to go ahead and sell them off in some way, shape, or form. And we've seen that with some of our panelists talking about acquisitions from other major companies. So yeah, I think that this has been for someone at a very high level. I think that there's takeaways from all of these panelists, and for folks that are newcomers, you can certainly see that where the trend is going with regards to this new era of intellectual property. And it's come a long way in a short period of time. And one of the things that you mentioned, Professor Wang, was the fact that about Satoshi Nakamoto. And that whole thing, Satoshi Nakamoto is not just one person, but it's a number of people that invented essentially Bitcoin, which was really the first blockchain iteration. And so blockchain is kind of the wave of the future, and what you're seeing with regards to frictionless payments is really thankful to Satoshi Nakamoto, and I got involved in this in a very obtuse way in China. The one thing that has been interesting being in China for all these years is that everyone sort of comes through here at one point or another, and good, bad, or indifferent. And as a result, everyone looks at the growth of the China market and being involved in blockchain and Bitcoin, and with some of these characters, infamous, notorious, whatever you want to say, they've come and been in and out and through China as well. And I think that the tremendous growth is going to happen in this era, in this age of frictionless economy and with blockchain, and with 5G and the SEPs with 5G. So that's a little bit of my summary on what we saw from some of the superstars that are in this panel, and it was something else.
Thank you very much for the highlight about the conference, our speakers, and also the stories behind for the Bitcoins. There are questions coming just now because audience, they see through your profound background and knowledges and connections worldwide. They're wondering, as the founder and stakeholder of the Lehman Bush PE firm with the presidents in the United States, and actually you entered China during a very early stage before China even opened their door to the whole world. So would you mind sharing the history for actually you have been in China for about 3 decades, and what's your view, your visions for your business, and what is the current development about this Lehman Bush PE firm?
Yeah, no, thanks a lot for asking. I mean, the reason Lehman Bush came into existence, of course, was a relationship that was developed with the Bush family. I mean, they were among. I mean, George Herbert Walker Bush, and this predated my time, certainly was stationed in Beijing in the 70s. I didn't come until the 80s. He was a constant visitor, and as with other folks in his family over the years, and then. And I got to know them as a result of that, and through various other friends and relations. But really, I was trained as a lawyer and started out as a lawyer. But the way that Chinese law works is that there were some restrictions in the 80s and 90s, and even up until very recently with the U.S.-China trade. Let's call it a dispute or misunderstanding. Whereby some of the foreign direct investment was prohibited or was limited as to what kind of shareholding could be held by a foreign company. So what happened were there were a lot of opportunities that foreign direct investors needed to be involved in, and then the shareholding had to be held by a Chinese legal person. A foreign invested enterprise like Lehman Bush, what became Lehman Bush, was holding some of those shares in these things in order to safeguard, many times in an escrow-like situation. Though the need for that sort of has fallen away, where the legal firm was holding these shares in escrow, and then it got involved through my relationship with Neil Bush, who was became this shareholder in Lehman Bush. And then we looked at different kinds of investment, and most of them, it's been wide ranging. But we were, like anything, necessity is the mother of invention. When you look at Bitcoin and when you look at blockchain, that came after the 2008 financial crisis. That came after some negative reaction and some difficulty with the economy of the world at that time. And it was the same with Lehman Bush. It really came by where synergies came together. And now that private equity firm, we've been going on close to 20 years now. And it's served a purpose for, not only our interests in investment, but and with other folks, but also foreign direct investment in areas that are now open to a lot of different people. So we got a bit of a head start. But it's been a wild ride, and it is certainly something I did not contemplate, and it's not something, anybody who went to law school, unfortunately, was trained in the law and not necessarily in business. So it was business in real time, learning things. Whereas people like Neil Bush, he has a master's in business administration, so he's a geologist, but then trained in business, and so that was helpful. And then the synergies with other people who participated have made Lehman Bush into something that is extraordinary, I think. So thanks for asking.
Highly appreciate for Professor Lemon's very comprehensive sharing your China experiences. Before we close the panel, audience would like to hear from you with your profound and singular background, an American knowing China so much and living in China for over 30 years. What would be your recommendation for corporates in China or foreign companies to enter China for business under current US and China trade conflicts? Moreover, if you were the CEO or Chief Legal Counsel of Huawei or ZTE, these two leading 5G standard essential panel holders, what would be your strategy for the current era?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Professor Wang. I tell you, I think that having observed and worked with, legal counsel, general counsel, intellectual property counsel worldwide, the one thing that I have to note is that, we in the intellectual property area are not necessarily the drivers with regards to multinational corporations. And that's a shame, and that's something that should be corrected. So there was this crossover. If you look back, and I'm going to speak sort of hyperbolically, when you look at something like Apple computer, someone says, oh, Steve Wozniak, Steve Jobs, they moved over from the engineering part. Steve Jobs didn't even graduate from university, but certainly Wozniak and him worked together as a team, and they came up with innovation. And innovation, whatever that is, which is inside Apple today, is still resonating with consumers. That would be something, whether it's true or not, is on the cutting edge. But they made that movement. Steve Wozniak worked at IBM. He worked for Big Blue, and he was one of these folks that was, a salary guy, and he made the transition from being a salary guy at IBM to being what he is today. And then Steve Jobs, of course, never entered into that. But what we see is these guys have become rock stars. What we don't see in multinational corporations is intellectual property lawyers, unfortunately, and general counsel from intellectual property, although the greatest value is accumulated from intellectual property. These are not folks that have worked into the C-suite executives. And I think that multinational corporations have to kind of give a rethink as to that, because that's the greatest keeper of wealth is the intellectual property department. The decisions oftentimes aren't necessarily made by the intellectual property department. And some of that, as an observation, has been the type of person who goes into prosecution of intellectual property is a certain kind of character, and that character doesn't necessarily lend itself often to being a C-suite executive who's calling these shots. A guy like Steve Jobs, and just to go back to him, was, a sort of a disagreeable person, was somebody who was pushing people in the intellectual property department, and pushing, and some say cheating Steve Wozniak, who was an innovator. If you see any of the biographies or read any of them, that Steve Jobs sort of took advantage of the intellectual property person or the engineer, which is Steve Wozniak. And I'm not saying that in any kind of caustic way. I'm just giving an observation. So what I see in my best recommendation for folks now in the intellectual property department is try to use that leverage to have profound impact on on what's happening with the C-suite, with the decision makers. And almost universally, like I said, I don't see those folks, although they're very important to us in the intellectual property field, amongst intellectual property lawyers. but we don't see them impacting decisions on the C-suite. And just like there's been this movement to, create equality or diversity in the boardrooms, I think intellectual property lawyers need to also stand their ground. So that's a very broad kind of an approach, but I think that you'll find some incredibly innovative thinkers in that department. With regards to what they should look for, I mean, what you're seeing even now, I think 2 days ago, Huawei, and you brought this up, Professor Wang, that 2 days ago, Huawei, or was it thereabouts, they had made an announcement, certainly in March, that they were going to be charging out for standard essential patents in 5G. Huawei, as you probably know, is, I think, China's largest patent protector within China and outside of China, I believe, of any Chinese company. And ZTE is somewhere in there as well.
Yes.
So you're seeing a lot of intellectual property, and those are granted rights. And then the question is, now they're finally starting to charge for them. And this may be, a fallout from the U.S.-China trade wars. But it's also kind of a direction where you're seeing where they had been leaving money on the table, okay? And they also have to try to, along with some of your other guests, I mean, DOCOMO and other people are involved in 5G and standard essential patents. So the question is kind of a foot race as to who are going to be the SEPs with regards to 5G. And so they've taken a whack at that. And that is going to be probably the most profound change that will affect all of us, because it has to do with the Internet of Things, which is this communication between all these sort of things that are within our offices, within our household, within our automobiles, and how we move and act in the future. And so this is, really a super big frontier that we are entering in. And I think many of us as intellectual property lawyers and folks who are actually commanding intellectual property portfolios, probably like a frog that's simmering in the boil, in boiling water. It happens very slowly and then very fast. And I think that people don't understand that they've got to start to play in that game. It's not just about prosecution. It's not necessarily always just about litigation, but it's about how do you actually make those things work for you. And I don't work for you which as far as SEPs, with cross licensing, with putting together a way to best utilize the monetary advantage with that portfolio that you have. And the problem is that laypersons and people in the C-suite don't really understand the gravity of the value of these things, as well as the people in the intellectual property department. So that's what my best advice to them would be: obviously continue to have as much protection, as broad a protection as you can get with your patent portfolios. There's always this I don't think Huawei and ZTE are the problems necessarily with who needs advice, because they're going like crazy. I think that that North America and other foreign markets have a real hard time sometimes protecting their intellectual property in China, in other jurisdictions too, because they say something as absurd as, well, there's no protection there, or they're listening to mainstream media with regards to the idea that there's intellectual property theft. Yes, there is intellectual property theft, but you waive intellectual property protection if you don't protect it. And I think everyone that's listening to this certainly understands that notion. But I get it from people from my country, certainly, that they're not protecting their, and then as a result, there's perceived intellectual property theft or protection, but there really isn't technically, because they didn't protect their rights there in the first place. So I think that people need to get their skates on from other parts of the world and participate. I mean, China is in a lot of different areas the largest intellectual property, what a place where the people are protecting now in the world, with regards to trademarks, with regards to utility patents and design patents. So you're seeing a great surge with that. A lot of those are coming from within China. So so that's growing. So my recommendation certainly would be, God protects the protected, monetize what you have. Otherwise, you're just it's just kind of a waste of time, energy, and effort to go ahead and protect that stuff. And I look at some of the intellectual property portfolios for some universities, for example. They're not utilizing 100% or 80% of their portfolios, and that actually could come and create money as opposed to looking for money from donors. So that would be kind of my message of going forward. It's a kind of a general message. It's one that seems obvious at first blush, but I don't see enough participation of people on C-suite executives and monetization of these intellectual property rights that where they can really make the company grow exponentially. I remember when I was a law student, and this is so long ago now, but and my property professor, that was real property, said, how does somebody become wealthy? And everyone's kind of like thinking, well, get a good job, I guess. And his answer was, own something that appreciates rapidly. And intellectual property is exactly that. Real property is that. I think Chinese people, Asian people understand it. But I think that the C-suite executives, not the folks who are necessarily listening to this, don't necessarily understand that message. And part of our problem is we're not communicating as IP professionals to the multinational corporation C-suite executives to be able to utilize these things well. So, and make decisions for the company. So that's my wish going forward in the new era, certainly, Professor Wang.
Thank you very much for so many highlights and your insightful experience with the true cases behind the scene. We sincerely hope we can meet you soon in the near future to learn more highlights on how the world economy could be better through applying technology, intellectual property, and also the wisdom from the human being. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Lemon, and thank you for all our eminent panelists, Nagasawa-san, Dr. Kim, Professor Su, Ogawa-san. Thank you so much for such meaningful and insightful knowledge sharing with true stories behind the scene. We sincerely hope we can meet you all again in the near future to learn more highlights how this world economy could be better through applying technology and intellectual property monetization. Thank you all, sir. And thank you for all our audience as well. And see you soon.